It was just past midnight when the quiet streets of Maplewood, a neighborhood usually defined by the hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog, became the setting for something unimaginable. Most residents were asleep, unaware that the night would soon be shattered by an act so shocking that it would haunt the community for months to come. Security cameras, installed by careful homeowners who wanted nothing more than peace of mind, captured a scene that would leave law enforcement, neighbors, and anyone who saw it in disbelief. The footage begins, innocuously enough. A figure slowly moving along the sidewalk, seemingly ordinary, almost casual, but then the figure pauses, glances around as if making sure no one is watching, and then continues toward a particular house, a home belonging to Daniel Morris, a 34-year-old accountant known for his quiet demeanor and friendly smile. Daniel had lived in Maplewood for over a decade. He was the kind of man who greeted neighbors with a nod, always returned lost pets to their owners, and led a life so ordinary that on the surface nothing could have hinted at the tragedy about to unfold. Inside his home, Daniel was winding down, oblivious to the danger outside. He had locked his doors, set the alarm, and had no reason to suspect anyone would want to harm him. But the person outside had other plans. As the clock ticked closer to 12:30 a.m., the shadow outside crept closer to Daniel's front door. What followed was an assault so swift and brutal that it was over in seconds. Yet the reverberations of that single moment would echo through the entire community for weeks. Neighbors reported hearing a loud crash around the time of the attack, but by the time anyone arrived, the perpetrator was gone. The police arrived quickly, responding to multiple 911 calls. What they found was a scene that would haunt them long after that night. Daniel was found in his living room, the result of an unprovoked attack that left him with injuries too severe for anyone to survive. The level of violence suggested not just intent, but a chilling precision, as though the perpetrator had studied the household and planned every move in advance. The security footage provided the first glimpse of the attacker. It showed a masked figure, dressed in dark clothing, moving with calculated caution. At first glance, the scene almost looked like someone staging a robbery, but nothing was taken. No money, no valuables. The only thing left behind was fear, terror, and questions that would plague investigators for months. As the news spread, Maplewood's normally serene streets began to feel different. Residents who had once felt safe behind their locked doors now found themselves checking windows late at night, wondering if someone might be watching them too. The sense of community, once a source of comfort, was replaced with suspicion and unease. People began to question everything: the strangers walking down the street, the cars parked too long in driveways, the neighbors who seemed just a little too curious. Investigators quickly realized that this was not the work of a random criminal. The attack was precise, calculated, and executed with a level of confidence that suggested the perpetrator knew exactly what they were doing. Forensic teams combed through the home, searching for any clue that could reveal the identity of the attacker. Fingerprints, fibers, and even digital evidence were collected. Yet each lead seemed to dissolve into more questions than answers. It was as if the criminal had vanished into the night, leaving only fear and confusion in their wake. One of the most disturbing aspects of the case was the complete lack of motive. Daniel was well liked, had no known enemies, and lived a life so routine that it made the brutality of the attack all the more incomprehensible. Investigators explored every angle: personal disputes, financial motives, even random acts of violence. But nothing fit. The randomness made it terrifying. It suggested that anyone could be a target, that the security of home and routine offered no protection against the darkness that had struck that night. Neighbors shared chilling accounts of what they saw, or thought they saw, around the time of the attack. A jogger passing by mentioned a shadowy figure lingering near the corner of the street earlier in the evening. Another neighbor remembered hearing footsteps on the pavement, quick and deliberate, moments before the attack. These accounts, combined with the security footage, painted a picture of someone methodically stalking their victim, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The investigation soon drew national attention. True crime podcasts, news outlets, and social media were flooded with speculation about the attack, theories about who might be responsible, and concerns about public safety. But despite the intense scrutiny, The case remained unsolved for weeks. The trail of evidence seemed to go cold with every passing day, leaving the community in a state of collective anxiety. Law enforcement officers knew that solving this case would require more than just forensic science. They needed someone to recognize the patterns, someone to provide a lead that could pierce the veil of secrecy surrounding the attack. And then, almost by accident, a breakthrough emerged, not from technology but from human observation. A neighbor who had been out walking her dog remembered something crucial, a detail in the security footage that had been overlooked. A small emblem on the attacker's jacket, visible for just a few seconds, could provide the key to identifying the suspect. Forensic analysts worked tirelessly to enhance the footage, studying every frame for anything that could lead to an arrest. The emblem, once identified, became a significant piece of evidence, helping investigators narrow down their search to a specific group of individuals. It was a painstaking process, one that required patience, precision, and the knowledge that any misstep could allow the perpetrator to disappear again. While investigators worked behind the scenes, the impact on the community was unmistakable. Local businesses reported fewer customers after dark. Parents kept their children inside, afraid that the same horror could strike again. The streets that once seemed inviting now carried an air of menace. Each shadow a potential threat. Each unknown figure a possible danger. Despite the fear and uncertainty, the residents of Maplewood refused to let the tragedy define them. Neighborhood watch groups formed, patrols increased, and people began taking small steps to reclaim their sense of safety. The community came together, united by a shared desire to prevent another incident and to honor the memory of Daniel Morris. As days turned into weeks, investigators continued to follow leads, interrogate suspects, and piece together the events leading up to that fateful night. Every detail mattered: the movement of the attacker, the time of entry, the precise execution of the crime. It was like assembling a complex puzzle, with the understanding that the wrong piece could send them down a false path. Finally, after tireless work, a lead emerged that would change the course of the investigation. The emblem on the jacket, combined with digital evidence and witness accounts, pointed to an individual who had lived on the fringes of the community, someone who had remained largely invisible until now. This discovery would ultimately bring law enforcement one step closer to unraveling a crime that had left an entire neighborhood in shock. The breakthrough sent a surge of energy through the investigation team. For weeks they had been chasing leads that went nowhere. But now, with a specific suspect in mind, the pieces began to align. Surveillance footage, witness accounts, and digital trails converged, painting a portrait of someone who had meticulously planned the attack. Every step, every movement, every calculated pause suddenly made sense in a way that sent chills down the spines of the detectives. The suspect, a 29-year-old male named Victor Hayes, had a history that, on the surface, seemed unremarkable. Neighbors described him as quiet, a person who kept to himself and rarely drew attention. Yet behind that facade lay a mind capable of carefully observing, calculating, and executing a violent act, without leaving an immediate trace. It was a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and that danger sometimes lurked where least expected. Authorities moved carefully, knowing that one wrong move could allow Victor to vanish into the crowd. Surveillance was intensified, and every known contact and location associated with him was scrutinized. It wasn't long before they discovered a series of behaviors that mirrored the precision seen during the attack on Daniel: late-night outings, unusual patterns of movement, and a growing fascination with certain neighborhoods. All pointed to someone planning something beyond the ordinary. Finally, the arrest was made in the early hours of a quiet morning. Victor Hayes was taken into custody without incident, though the tension in the air was palpable. The community, still reeling from the shock of Daniel's death, felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Relief, because the person responsible had been identified. Apprehension, because the details that would emerge about his actions were more disturbing than anyone had imagined. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling sequence of events. Victor had been watching Daniel for weeks before the attack, studying his routines, noting his comings and goings, and even observing small habits that would make the assault easier to execute. It was methodical, premeditated, and calculated with a precision that made the random nature of the violence even more horrifying. He had chosen the night carefully, knowing when the streets would be empty and when Daniel would be most vulnerable. The attack itself, once analyzed frame by frame, revealed a terrifying efficiency. Every movement was deliberate, every action measured to minimize resistance and maximize control. It was the work of someone who had rehearsed in his mind, who had anticipated every potential obstacle and planned accordingly. To investigators, it was both fascinating and deeply unsettling, a glimpse into the mind of a criminal operating with cold, calculated intent. But the case didn't end with Victor's arrest. In court, prosecutors painted a stark picture of the crime, detailing the premeditation, the stalking, and the impact on the community. Victim impact statements spoke volumes about the fear and trauma left in the wake of Daniel's death. Friends, family, and neighbors recounted the lasting changes in their lives, the sleepless nights, the heightened vigilance, and the lingering sense of vulnerability that no one could ignore. Defense attorneys attempted to portray Victor in a different light, arguing that his actions were not fully understood, that there were underlying factors that might explain his behavior. Yet the evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, forensic data, and witness testimonies all pointed to one conclusion. The jury listened intently, the gravity of the crime weighing heavily on everyone in the courtroom. After days of deliberation, the verdict was finally delivered. Guilty. The courtroom reacted with a mixture of relief and solemnity. Justice, while it could never bring Daniel back, had been served. The community could begin to heal, knowing that the person responsible had been held accountable. Yet the memory of that night, the images from the security footage, and the fear that had swept through Maplewood would linger long after the trial ended. In the months that followed, the neighborhood slowly started to reclaim its sense of normalcy. People reopened their doors, walked their streets without fear, and rebuilt the trust that had been shattered. Yet, the case remained a cautionary tale about how quickly safety can be disrupted, and how ordinary lives can be changed forever in a single, violent moment. Law enforcement officials used the case as an example of the importance of vigilance, community cooperation, and the power of seemingly small details. The emblem on Victor's jacket, a detail almost overlooked, had been the key that cracked the case wide open. It was a reminder that in the pursuit of justice, nothing could be ignored, and every observation, no matter how minor, could prove crucial. Psychologists later analyzed Victor's behavior, attempting to understand what drove him to commit such a calculated act of violence. While they could identify patterns consistent with obsession and premeditation, the deeper motivations remained a mystery. The human mind, they noted, could be unpredictable, capable of darkness that defied easy explanation. For the residents of Maplewood, life moved forward, but the shadow of that night remained. They had experienced something most people only see in movies or hear about in news reports, and the memory of Daniel's tragic death served as a reminder of the fragility of safety. Neighborhood watch programs continued. Cameras were upgraded and parents remained vigilant, ensuring that the lessons learned would not be forgotten. Daniel Morris's story, though tragic, became more than just a case study for law enforcement. It became a symbol of the resilience of a community in the face of senseless violence. It highlighted the importance of paying attention to the small details, of supporting one another in times of fear, and of never underestimating the power of ordinary people to make a difference in seeking justice. The footage that once shocked the world now serves as a chilling reminder. Violence can strike anywhere, even in the quietest of neighborhoods, yet it also tells a story of determination, of careful observation, and of the unyielding pursuit of justice that ultimately brought a dangerous individual to account. Even years later, Maplewood remembers Daniel. His memory lives on, not just in those who knew him personally, but in the strengthened bonds of a community that refused to be defined by fear. Cameras remain, patrols continue, and vigilance has become a way of life. The brutal attack may have left scars, but it also sparked a determination to protect, to watch over one another, and to ensure that no other resident would have to endure the same fate. In the end, the story of Daniel Morris is a reminder that the darkness that exists in the world can be confronted, that justice, though sometimes delayed, can prevail, and that the courage of a community can turn tragedy into a legacy of resilience and awareness. It is a story that shocks, horrifies, and captivates, But above all, it is a story that demands attention, reflection, and remembrance.